Great. Well, good morning, and we're here to talk about a super cool topic, what's new and exciting in textiles, and we're going to hear about some incredible innovations that are coming from this university. Well, we're going to start with Sam from Adidas and talk about how there is a growing push from consumers not only to have like the best possible performance from textiles, in this case in the form of athletic shoes, but also for sustainability. And can you talk about how Adidas is addressing that?
Absolutely. Does my mic work? Possibly. Doesn't work.
Can you hear him? Can you hear him? No.
Do I have to press the button? My mic's not working, but should I keep talking? Maybe I'll borrow yours.
Borrow mine.
Sure, I borrow this one. What we're seeing a lot at the moment is that the demands of consumers in the sporting goods industry are really changing. They're definitely no longer purely motivated by the idea of being 1 second faster, jumping 10 centimeters higher. We see a lot of convergence between the worlds of fashion and sport and trend and high performance, but also we see a much bigger engagement of young consumers in the idea of sustainability and really caring about their world. I think a product that hopefully some of you may have seen that Adidas created recently that really synchronizes with this story and this changing consumer perspective is this shoe where, for example, we created an upper of a running shoe entirely out of recycled ocean plastic. So we built this shoe in collaboration with a company called Parley for the Oceans. They collect plastic bottles in the Maldives from the sea, and we melted the bottles, we respun the yarn, and we managed to pull waste material out of the environment and upcycle it into an incredibly cool shoe that hopefully some of you have seen. But I think this really isn't the final stage of material innovation, and what we're really hoping for in the future is that instead of recycling bad materials from the environment, we can work with scientists and with innovators to create materials that seamlessly reintegrate into the environment at the end of use. And I think this is something where the biofabrication industry is really going to create the next step in material innovation, and this is something that we're definitely very excited about.
So I think that's a perfect segue into what's happening right here at the university. And so here now I want to talk to you, Thomas, about how the next stage in textiles is actually using living tissue. So tell us how that works.
Yeah, so I think the most important message I would like to spend is that we should have open eyes, open minds when we go through our world. And so I brought one of my co-workers here, and she's alive. It's a lady. She's alive. I can show you. But she doesn't move that fast. She's from Australia, and the reason why I brought her is because she has been one of the inspirations that lead to material innovations that we try to now actually use in a lot of different things. And the point is that just looking at the creature and looking at these webs, it immediately gives you ideas what to do with it. It's from Australia, and the native people from Australia, well, they did not have squash rackets like we have here, but they actually realized this material is so strong, so I can even, push it on my knee. You can use this kind of thing for fishing, for hunting. And this was the very first application of spider silk. So that's the material this spider makes. Yeah? And this is much more superior than silk that you typically know from silkworms, which we use for textile applications. Because in nature, silkworms produce silk for protecting the offspring, the worm, during the transformation into a butterfly. And this is a completely different reason this material is used than a spider uses silk. Because the spider uses it, as this spider, for hunting. So it has to withstand the impact of the inflying prey. And this is the first thing you have to understand. So similar material, completely different usage, different properties. So you have to understand the properties.
So before we go deeper into the science, I want to talk about the real-world applications for this. So already you are looking at building sports shoes, improving breast implants, making cosmetics, and improved drug delivery, baby clothes. So let's talk a little bit about, well, what are the properties? How do you isolate them? And then how do you turn them into commercial products by working with big corporates?
So, as I already mentioned, the mechanical properties, they're obvious. You directly can see them. Another thing that's not that obvious is, if you would have a close look at this web, you will not find microbes, no fungi, no bacteria. This is sterile. And the reason, again, is the material. And funnily, I mean, Aristotle was one of the first, more than 2,000 years ago, that realized this property without knowing it. So because you can take a spider's web and put it on a wound, and the wound will heal faster, and it's kept sterile. And this was kind of the inspiration to say, let's use the mechanics, but also let's use the other properties that come with silk. And therefore, we started to create something that we can spray as a gel on our skin to protect the skin from bacteria, from microbes, or even coat implant materials to protect the implant from body attacks. Maybe not all of you know that if you take such a silicone implant and put it inside your body will react against it, because this is a foreign material, it's not natural. And the first thing is, the body tries to destroy it. Won't work, this is silicone, right? So the next thing is, well, if the body cannot destroy it, it tries to actually pack it. So it makes a capsule surrounding it. And in 10% of the patients, this capsule will inflame. And this is a severe side effect, because if it inflames, this can be even lethal. I mean, you can get a sepsis, you can die of it. So you have to remove the implant, which at a beauty surgery is not that a big issue. But if you need implants for cancer treatment, for instance, this is a big issue. And therefore, we try to identify now the possibilities, where can we use the properties of the natural material. One drawback, the spider doesn't produce a lot. And second drawback, spiders are cannibalistic. So I just have brought one, because if there would be a second, they would fight. And probably by the end of the talk, one is dead.
Okay, so that means that as a scientist, you had to find a way to take some of the spider's genes, genetic material, and figure out a way to propagate that in a different way. How do you do that?
So this is probably our first connection to being, well, digital and not analog. We have to transfer information from one organism to something that is not fighting. And we were looking for something completely simple, which are bacteria. So we transferred information from the spider into a bacteria, which we can grow large scale. So we can grow them in 120,000 liter reactors. Right? So we feed them, we give them some sugar, they grow, and then actually they have also a switch, so we can turn on silk production on demand. And then they produce, and then we harvest the bacteria, and all we have to do is purify the raw material. But this is not a fiber. I'm always asked, well, how do you teach a bacterium to make a fiber? Well, we can't. We can't teach a bacterium anything. We have a powder. Right? And this powder can be processed, we can make a cream out of it, or, and this is actually the big step, we can make fibers out of that. And if you have a close look, this pretty much looks the same, the same as this one. It has a golden shine. This is also some natural behavior, and this was developed in 2013, and then we were looking for possible applications, and this is where Adidas came into play.
And for example, so one thing that we're very open to in Adidas, which I think is an exciting thing with working with people like yourself, is that we're definitely very interested in finding new material innovations, not necessarily waiting until we have the perfect application in mind or commerciality, but we build a shoe, we see if we can make it work, we share it with the world, and we discover what's possible. And I think to be on this journey of creation and discovery and being able to make a shoe like this, which I'll
This is the spider
pass
silk
around
shoe.
as well. Yeah, this is the spider silk, fully functional running shoe that we created, I think, last year, and we don't really know what we're going to do with it, but it's something very interesting, and we've created something new, and we're open to seeing where material innovation takes us in the future, and this synchronization between science and industry in a very creative sphere, I think, is an incredibly exciting space at the moment.
So a couple of things here. First of all, since this is made of natural materials, what happens when the shoe comes to the end of its life?
Well, the most funny thing is you could eat it. Literally, because spiders eat their webs when they're done and they move on. So you literally could eat it. I have to be very careful because sometimes I tell that my collaborator partners, and then I really have one person that ate then the material afterwards. He still survived, so he's doing fine.
Not shooting well.
But most people won't eat their shoes, so what else could you do to get rid of them?
No, but the entire material is made of proteins, so they're biodegradable. So we need some specific enzyme, and that's the important thing. We need digestive enzymes, which typically not occur somewhere out there, because that's one of the big fears. I have a shoe and then it degrades while I walk. That's not the case, because typically silk is very stable. So if you go to your basement probably and you find a spider web there, and then 100 years later your anxiousness go down there, it's still there. It's not degraded just in the environment. You need a liquid, and you need specific enzymes, which we have in our intestine, for instance, so you can eat it, so you can degrade it, and on demand you just add the enzyme, and overnight the material is gone, and it's actually separated then in amino acids.
Very cool. So let's talk a little bit about the way that you work with big corporates. So Adidas, you mentioned, Thomas, is particularly open to new ideas, innovation. They have a whole team, and that's very important because you mentioned that in nature, everything is multi-purpose, right? So we don't know yet all the many different ways that we might use these kind of materials. And you need to have some interesting sort of brainstorming and openness in the collaboration between researchers and corporates. So I don't know if you want to address that, Sam.
I'll try and see how on point I am. I mean, one thing that I find as a designer really fascinating at the moment is that we can allow material innovation to drive entire new aesthetic directions for product. The new materials that are being created, be it in biofabrication, for example, they have a different aesthetic than anything that we've currently worked with, and we can allow that to drive a completely new look and feel, to create new experiences for consumers who are constantly demanding newness. Now, we're talking about digital a lot today, and a smart device that our consumers are on pretty much 24 hours a day. There's a constant thirst for a new aesthetic, for a new compelling story. I mean, I just brought a couple of other different examples with me. But we've created, for example, completely 3D printed midsoles for running shoes. I mean, I'm wearing the first generation. This will be the second generation. The aesthetic that the technology creates drives the look and feel of the product, and it looks different to anything people have experienced before. And I think this is something that we really get by being very open to collaboration with industry and with science around new material directions. Or, for example, we create a completely laceless, high-functional football boot that's being played by the German national team right now in the Confederations Cup. But the aesthetic of this elastic material, it's just what the material looks like. We've allowed the material to be very pure and to breathe on its own, but it creates a completely different look and a completely different fit experience. And this is something where I find the current world of material innovation that we seem to be in, it's creating an entirely new aesthetic palette for designers to work with. And this, I think, it's incredible. It's awe-inspiring at the moment to see where this could potentially take us. I have no idea what the materials are going to look like that science is going to deliver to us, but I definitely think that they're going to look different than anything that we've experienced at the moment.
Beyond aesthetics, there are some really interesting applications for that are connected with 3D printing. So, Thomas, do you want to talk to us about 3D printing and the heart
I mean, what Sam said at the end is, I think, very important. I mean, we deal now with new types of materials that we've never seen before. So we don't know about the properties, and we don't know where the path leads to. And this was actually the same when we started with silk, with spider silk, right? I mean, there was one clear aim to make a fiber, but before we had the fiber, we had the skin creams, we had nail polish, we had silicone breast implants covered with silk. We never thought about that before. And a new thing that we realized is these new materials, they have new fascinating properties. And one really exciting property is that if you take the liquid before you make the fiber, you can 3D print it. So now think about, you can make any shape, combine the properties that I mentioned, good mechanics, biocompatibility, and now actually thinking about that, bring that inside your body, right? And the idea was born to actually print now not just, well, supporting materials, but can we even print living matter? Can we print materials with cells to print tissue? And Stefan Leibel mentioned in the morning that, well, I convinced him, well, some years ago to give me some money and well, don't let me move from Bayreuth. By giving him this idea, why not printing organs? Why not printing a heart? And for heart tissue, you need exactly what I mentioned. Good mechanics, long livability, biocompatibility, and if you would like to regenerate heart tissue, you also have to print the cells together with the material, because whenever you have a heart attack, your heart muscle cannot regenerate for one simple reason: heart muscle cells do not migrate, they don't move. Typically, if you have damaged skin, that it can recover because cells crawl in, they migrate in, they repair the tissue. This is not the case in heart. When you want to repair something at heart, you have to place the cell where you want to be. And this is 3D printing. And this is right now the challenge. So we started that, and the first publication was accepted last Monday, so it's really fresh. We can print spider silk together with heart muscle cells, and actually after a week, the heart muscle cells start to synchronize and start to beat in a tissue culture plate. And of course, next steps. Thank you. And next steps will be, can we then actually use that as a functional tissue?
Now, beyond spiders, you're also looking at other living organisms, like mussels, for example. What might come out of that?
Yeah, so the funny thing with mussels, with blue mussels, is everyone just knows them from the restaurant, and they taste beautiful, and there's, well, not much interesting material there because this is cut off before. So if you look in nature, mussel again uses fibers to attach to the rock. And this was fascinating for us because this has to withstand tight, hot and cold temperatures. It's drying out, you know, if you're in the tide. It attaches a very solid material, a rock, with very soft material inside the mussel. It's a gradient. And actually then we ask around, can we do that? Can polymer chemists do that? And everyone told me no. And therefore we tried to find out how that works. And this is also very fascinating because nature does it differently that we as an engineer, as a material researcher would do it. And this is what we try to adopt now to get new principles with commonly available materials to make new things. So we're not just looking for the materials, but also how they are processed. And then, as I mentioned, we get something completely different, a shoe without laces.
I think, for example, it's a huge paradigm shift in material creation, that we're not trying to build materials that look and function like the natural property. We're building materials that are the natural property. I mean, just thinking of aesthetics, and you're talking about shellfish, the idea of I don't have to electroplate a product to make it have the appearance of mother of pearl. Maybe I can just print real mother of pearl onto it, for example. Or, you know, you talk about a material that's lighter than feathers, or as light as a feather. Maybe in the future we will just print a feather or create a real, we make materials that are the thing. They're not an approximation of the thing, and I think this is a fascinating area.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So we currently have a request if we can print hair.
Beyond sort of those kind of things, let's talk about, well, what could be the impact on the environment, right? Because a lot of the materials that we create in the past were based on petrochemicals, which we're about to run out of, right? And we also need to worry about making the earth more green and so forth. So, how do you see the impact on the environment?
Well, we do a lot of life cycle analysis also for our materials, and I think it will have a huge impact. And this is one of the reasons why we have close contacts also with car manufacturers, because they would like to have a CO2 neutral car in terms of the materials that they use. And if you have renewable material resources, you actually can use materials that have properties that maybe even outperform man-made ones. And you can fully recycle them. And I think this will be the future. I mean, that's my vision.
I mean, I think it's definitely a must in the sporting goods industry that we continue to reduce our impact and the need for recycling product from the outset. I think the idea that you can dissolve a product at the end of life with an enzyme and it disappears and its environmental impact is completely mitigated. I think this is it's a real game changer for the sporting goods industry. Like a less reliance on petrochemicals is a huge benefit for the world.
And maybe I might add one thing. It's not a downcycling, because the really cool thing is if you degrade the material, you can use all of the ingredients that you generate then to remake a new material. So it's not like with other products, where you recycle, but you always go down in quality from step to step. Here you can actually manufacture with the degradation products the same thing again.
Wow. Very, very cool. And I think a nice note for us to end on is a key takeaway of this is, Thomas, you mentioned that, in most things that are man-made and are synthetic are unidirectional. But in nature, everything has a multiple purpose. And I think we're all realizing today, and I think it's a very important thing for the students here as well, that, going forward, the best innovations are going to come from a multidisciplinary approach and a multimodal approach. And it requires a completely new and open way of thinking from corporations and also from scientists.
I thought something very interesting in the panel before us was talking about what can differentiate humans from machines in a smart machine age. I think the idea of us being fast to learn and open to consider applications of the new materials that a machine may create. I think that we don't know what's coming in the future and we don't know what the possibilities are going to be. But I mean, I had some more examples. That knitting in footwear is a relatively old invention, but we applied knitting with prime knit. And the technology allowed us to build the world's first functional laceless football shoe. But it's the leap of faith to imagine what you could create with the material and the potential application. I think this is the incredibly human skill in an age of rapidly advancing material science.
And adding that, I think that the key word that you mentioned, Jennifer, was multidisciplinarity. I dislike interdisciplinarity, because interdisciplinary, you're in between something. You need to have actually creative people coming from different areas, bring them together, show them something that you found. And 15 years ago, we were thinking as material researchers, right? We had no idea what you could do with this stuff. You need other people, you have to talk to them. And this is also something that Steffi is always programming, talk to the people, right? And I think this is really what you have to do. Go outside your discipline and talk to other people, and you get really fascinating new ideas. But then you have to know your business in order to get something out of it.
And when those two sides all come together and everybody is open-minded and innovative, great things come out. Can we see the spider silk shoe again?
I think it's somewhere in the audience.
It's gone.
I hope I get it back.
All right, great. Well, with that, let's have a huge round of applause to Thomas, Sam, and the spider.